Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to our program on Kardec Radio. And now, here's our host, Dr. Vanessa Anceloni.
Welcome, dear listener, to Kardec Radio. Today the show is about troubleshooting the Spiritist Center. And you may be asking, why do we need to troubleshoot a place that is for spirituality? Because it is founded and moved and organized by human beings. And we are perfectible, but not perfect. We make mistakes, basically for one reason. When Kardec asked the enlightened spirits in the Spirit's book, question 785, what is the greatest obstacle to progress? He was also asking about the progress of everything on earth, every organization, including Spiritist centers. And the answer is very straightforward: pride and selfishness. In modern words, ego. That's why Spiritist centers need troubleshooting, because our ego is on the way. What is important is always to fix ourselves up, because Allan Kardec, in the Medium's book, he talked about meetings and societies, rules, regulations on chapters 29 and 30. Did you know that this year we're celebrating 150 years of the Medium's book? And we need to read especially these two chapters if we want to put together a Spiritist center, a serious one. And when he talks about serious Spiritist centers and effective ones, he talks about in items 336. He says, let us not forget that Spiritism has enemies who are interested in preventing its development and who despise its successes. The most dangerous are not those who attack it openly, but those who act behind the scenes. They are those who, under the hypocritical appearance of interest for the cause, they criticize everything and form intimate and exclusive groups that soon break up the harmony of the whole. That is what they want. When dealing with such individuals, it is useless to appeal to the sentiments of charity and fraternity. When we are talking about these, we need to read more and study more. It would be very naive only for the people who don't know human nature and don't know the current status of spiritual development on earth to believe that just because we want to be spiritual, we want to practice spirituality and learn about Spiritism, it makes us better people. Not instantaneously. We need to work on it. And there are people who, due to self-interest, they want to break the harmony. And Kardec, in this chapter 29, talks about it. In item 337, he says, we can thus establish in principle that anyone in a Spiritist meeting who causes disorder and disharmony, either ostensibly and secretly through any means, is an adversarial agent, or at least an evil spirit who must be gotten rid of as soon as possible. Nonetheless, the very commitment which links the members of a meeting together creates obstacles to doing so, which is why it is proper to avoid indissoluble commitments. This is Kardec. He was an educator. He knew it all along that human nature is perfectible, which means we are not, just because we want to progress, we want to learn. And some people, they come to Spiritist centers. Not necessarily. They truly want to better themselves. Sometimes they are so egocentric that it's all about them. They haven't learned yet that when you go into a center, there is higher order. And talking about higher order, Dr. Bezerra de Menezes, in a book that everyone should study, Spiritual Dimensions of the Spiritist Center by Sueli Caldas-Schubert. Dr. Bezerra de Menezes, the doctor of the poor when he was incarnated last in Rio de Janeiro. Now, as a discarnate spirit, he's everywhere and elsewhere, bringing messages, bringing consolation, and through the amazing mediumship of Divaldo Franco, he wrote a forward note in the book of Sueli Caldas-Schubert, talking about Spiritist centers, and he says, the elevated spirits give credit to the Spiritist Center, where the vibrations of its incarnate and discarnate participants irradiate respect, fervent dedication, elevated thoughts where no vulgar depreciations happen. There they will be able to implement sublime works that will help and honor both planes of life. However, if its participants prefer to use the center for their entertainment, for social gatherings, or extravagant and inappropriate practices, they'll be considered mere clubs and associations of those who simply want to learn Spiritism in their leisure time. Dear friends, Emmanuel said that Spiritism has come for the maturation of our minds. We need to get mature. So it's a new era of spiritual maturity, and we're not afraid in Spiritism to combine reasoning with our emotions. To reason our faith, we need to use our reasoning. And in Spiritist centers, we need to use our reasoning because, as Kardec says in item 338 of the Medium's book, besides notoriously malevolent people who infiltrate meetings, there are those who, because of their very temperament, bring trouble wherever they go. Thus, too much care cannot be taken in admitting new members. The most harmful in this case are not those who are ignorant about the subject or even those who are disbelievers. Rather, those who should most particularly be cautioned against are people given to preconceived ideas, the theoretical disbelievers who question everything, and the proud who pretend to be privileged with the truth and always try to impose their opinions while disdaining whoever does not think as they do. Don't be fooled by their pretended desire to learn. You will encounter many who would feel displeased if they were obligated to agree that they had been wrong. Above all, guard yourselves against those insipid talkers who always want the last word, and those who only like to argue. They are both a waste of time and are of no use even to themselves. Spirits do not like idle words. And more. Item 339. In the light of need to avoid every cause of trouble and distraction, when a Spiritist society is organized, it should place all its attention on establishing appropriate measures to keep troublemakers from doing any harm and to facilitate their living by any means possible. Small or large societies and all meetings, no matter how important they are, must struggle against a further problem. Troublemakers are not only found amongst their members, but also in the invisible world. And just as there are protector spirits for institutions, cities, and nations, malevolent spirits also connect to groups and individuals. Dear friends, this is quite serious. This is spiritual maturity. It's like medicine, for example. If medical doctors were just wondering about health and didn't study about pathologies, how would they address our diseases? We need to know about health and we need to know about illnesses. We need to be aware that the good spirits are present, but there are conditions. Did you know there are conditions? Yes, there are. And Kardec talks about the conditions for Spiritist centers to function well, and this is written in item 341. He says, in order to avoid bad spirits and to favor the attraction of good spirits, we need a few conditions. First, perfect commonality of ideas and feelings amongst participants. Mutual benevolence amongst the members. Rejection of every feeling contrary to Christ-conscious feelings. A single desire to learn and improve through good spirit teachings and the taking advantage of their advices. Avoidance of anything in communicating with spirits just for curiosity. Respectful concentration and silence. Association of all participants through thought. Harmony among all members, rejecting any feeling of pride, vanity, superiority, while supporting the sole desire to make themselves useful. Are these conditions so difficult to fulfill that no one would be able to meet them? Kardec replies, we don't think so. Instead, we hope that truly serious groups, like those that already exist in various places, will multiply, and we do not hesitate to state that Spiritism owes its broadest growth to them. So serious groups are the ones that will remain and will stay. But of course, we want to know more. How can we troubleshoot our Spiritist centers? Are there ways and means to do so? Oh, yes, there are. And that's why we're bringing also here to the show Mauricio Cisneros Filho, the president of the United States Spiritist Council, to share with us insights on how we can take measures as Kardec recommended, to troubleshoot our centers from, of course, as the word says, problems, and to kickstart this show with a beautiful and illuminated prayer. Let us call Emmanuel, a beautiful prayer put together that serves the purpose of this program. It's about Jesus, Kardec, and us, and it's published in the book and CD by the Spiritist Society of Baltimore through the hands of Chico Xavier, Enlightening Messages. Let us listen to this now, enjoy, and after the break, we'll bring it to you, Mauricio Cisneros Filho, and many insights on how to troubleshoot Spiritist centers.
Jesus, Kardec, and us. Had Jesus thought too highly of himself so as not to tolerate contact with human weakness? Had he believed that everything should be left for God to do? Had he admitted that we were forever lost in our rebellion and delinquence? Had he constrained the success of his teachings to the support of the highly educated? Had he waited for monetary endowment and political backup in order to carry out his work? Or had he backed down in the face of sacrifice? We certainly would not have the light of the gospel, which opens for us the path to spiritual emancipation. Had Allan Kardec overrated his earned position in the aristocracy of intelligence, placing deserved honors and titles above his own convictions? Had he been expecting the partaking of illustrious personalities in the message which he bared? Had he waited for financial support to plunge into the task? Had he considered his difficulties as an educator with scarce time to devote to commitments outside his profession? Or had he backed down in the face of the slanders and personal attacks which marked his path? We would not have the Spiritist codification which complements the gospel and integrates us into the responsibility of living. Reflecting on Jesus and Kardec, we do not understand our thoughtlessness when we declare ourselves too virtuous, too busy, too educated, too shy, too incapable, or too disillusioned to attend to our own obligations in the Spiritist philosophy. If we consider this the master and the apostle of human renovation passed among men, suffering lacerations and exemplifying the good for love of the truth, while we, indebted consciences, run away from learning and serving for our own benefit, undoubtedly we will be, without noticing, under the hypnosis of an unseen obsession, showing balance on the outside and madness on the inside.
We will return to our program after these messages.
Kardec Radio, live every Saturday at 11 a.m.
Nourish your soul with Kardec Radio.
The newest edition of the Medium's book by Allan Kardec is now available. Purchase your copy online or via your ebook reader. Simply go to www.ediciofamerica.com today.
Nourish your soul with Kardec Radio.
Come to the third Toronto Spiritist Weekend on October 29 and 30 of 2011. The tribute event is to the 150 years of the Medium's book, and the theme of the event is mediumship, a discussion on the concept and its practice. The main topic is going to be the lecture by Dr. Vanessa Anzalone entitled Strengthen Your Emotional Intelligence and Have a Balanced Sixth Sense. The program opens at 5 p.m. Toronto time, and the first lecture is going to be from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. The following day, on Sunday, the opening session is at 9:30 for registration, and then at 10 a.m. it starts 2 sessions, one demystifying mediumship with José Mussi from Toronto, and on another room, mechanisms of mediumship. And then from 1 to 3 p.m., there is a session on mediumship or not by Paul Murphy, and on another room simultaneously, there is another session entitled Mediums and Mediumship. This is going to be held at 248 Ossington Avenue, Toronto, Canada. For more information, please contact the Toronto Spiritist Weekend at gmail.com. The event is sponsored by the Christian Spiritist Center, the Joana de Angelis Spiritist Study Group, and the Rest on the Way Spiritist Center.
Join us every Thursday live, Evolution in Two Worlds, a journey of the soul through the teachings of the Spirit Doctor, Andrea Luiz. Connect at www.tvcei.com, Channel 2.
Nourish Your Soul with Kardec Radio.
Enrich your spiritual senses and deepen your foundations of Spiritism with the book, What is Spiritism? By Allan Kardec. Buy your copy online or via your ebook reader. Go to www.ediceiofamerica.com today.
And now we return to our program.
Mauricio Cisneros Filho, President of the United States Spiritist Council, is here with us. He has been Spiritist all his life, and he voluntarily decided to be very active in the Spiritist movement in the United States. Decades ago, he founded the Spiritist Society of Palm Beach. Not only that, but he is so active in the movement that he once was the vice president of the Spiritist Federation of Florida, and since 2009, he became the president of the United States Spiritist Council. Mauricio, thank you so much for being at Kardec Radio and spending your time sharing insights with us today.
Thank you, Vanessa. It's wonderful to be here.
So, Mauricio, there is great need for Spiritist centers. How many centers do we have more or less in the U.S. today?
At the moment that we know, 77 Spiritist centers are formed and active in the U.S.
So, of course, in Brazil, if we made a comparison, it's like 15,000 Spiritist centers, more or less, right?
Exactly. We're just beginning our work here compared to Brazil.
And for sure, people will form more centers as we go by. So how, for the ones who are listening to us or get along the way and listen to us in the future, because Kardec Radio is on demand, you can listen to it on iTunes, you can listen to it at blogtalkradio.com/Kardec Radio, even at our website, kardecradio.com. If they are asking themselves, how do I form a center in my state, in my city? Is there a formula or a manual or guidelines for people who are willing to form Spiritist nuclei or centers?
Yes, Vanessa, that's a very complex question, and just so our listeners know, the more we divulge Spiritism, especially through the internet and so on, and the tendency is for us to see more and more Spiritist groups appear, some small, some more organized, but they are going to be appearing as they have been more and more. Last year alone, 3 new Spiritist groups that we know of were formed. So how do you form a Spiritist group? And there's no specific manual that tells you how to do that. There's different information in different books, different workbooks, especially from federations, Spiritist organizations, federations in Brazil. But there's no one specific manual that tells you how to do that. Usually, when we talk to people about it, we first ask, what kind of group do you want to form? Is it a small family group, a small study group that you're going to begin studying Spiritism at home, either studying Kardec's books or the Gospel according to Spiritism and so on? or is it going to be a group that you want to form a more formal group, in a sense where you're going to rent a location and hold your meetings there and advertise your meetings? So there's different ways of going about it. The most important thing before even thinking about forming a group is to really understand that it's always easier to start something, to begin this work, than it is to maintain it. Because sometimes people are very enthusiastic about Spiritist centers, about beginning a Spiritist center or a group, because they go to our events and they either meet Divaldo or Raul Teixeira, which are very well-known Spiritist speakers, and they are very enthusiastic about starting Spiritist centers, but they don't really realize how much work it is and how serious it is to go about maintaining the works of a Spiritist group, even if it is a small group. So here we are, thinking about starting a Spiritist group. If it is a familiar group or a small group where we start at our homes, we have a few options. We can open the Spirit's book and read it a little bit and talk about it. Each member of the family or each friend of the family who's shown up to participate can exchange their ideas revolving the text that was just read. You know, they can start with an initial prayer and finish with an initial prayer, or they can use the gospel according to Spiritism, or if they have any instructions whatsoever, or any education, any Spiritist education, they can even begin by studying workbooks that are related to systematic studies of Spiritism, such as some in other languages that exist, and some that exist even in English. As we know, there's a workbook that was prepared, a program that was prepared by the Spiritist Society of Baltimore. There was one that was prepared by the United States Spiritist Council. So if we have a little more education, Spiritist education, we can begin that way.
So Marito, when you're talking about the reasons why we're forming, the responsibility behind it, it reminds us of the teachings of many spirits compiled by Sueli Caldas Schubert in the book Dimensões Espirituais do Centro Espírita, a book that is not yet translated into English and would probably be translated as Spiritual Dimensions of the Spiritist Center, in which she talks about the behind the scenes of the Spiritist Center. For example, talking about the planning from the spiritual perspective on each center. So if people are forming centers, should they consider the spiritual perspective towards the incarnate team? And what can you tell us in regard to the real directorship that comes from the spirits?
Well, everything related, all work that we do related to spirituality is always coordinated by spiritual enlightened guides. And most of the time we think, I'm the Spiritist director of this organization, I'm the president of this, and I'm the coordinator of that. But we're only there, we're only having that opportunity to do those kinds of work because they allow us to do it. So we have an opportunity of growth. And many people forget about this. These organizations when they are formed, they have been formed, most of them anyway, in the spiritual realm. And we're only sensing what they are transmitting to us, their wishes of actually materializing this work here on earth.
So, Mauricio, when you talk about materializing, naturally we understand that because they have a plan, but we have free will also to put it in the material world. And sometimes people say to us, for example, Oh, ask the mentors of the center if we should put this flower on the right or the left. Is that how it happens actually?
We have to understand that Spiritists are supposed to be spiritually educated so we can learn to walk on our own 2 feet and not to be asking spiritual guides for every single little step, about every single little step we want to take all the time. Because, spiritual guides, they have a lot of important things to do. So it's not for us to be calling upon them to ask them if, the tablecloth we're going to use is going to be white or yellow and so on. But then again, if we have important things to ask them or to ask for their intuition and so on, then we should. But not to these minor things related to our Spiritist groups or centers.
So when we talk about troubleshooting, we don't have an actual, straightforward guide. Although you said, the literature spread out, it has a lot of guidance. One of the things that we observe is, as in André Louis' books, for example, Evolution into Worlds, every other paragraph, André Louis reminds us of order. There is order in the universe. There is order. In the more superior you go, more order you're going to find. Should we also consider that in a Spiritist center we have an actual order and not a hierarchy, but order? Is that how we think of it?
Yes, order in the Spiritist center, discipline in the Spiritist center, which many people forget to follow. Because, let's put it this way, when we go to a church or we go to a synagogue, we're not going to go there and just do whatever we want and say whatever we want and tell them or ask them to change the way they're doing things. We just don't do that. And the same thing should apply to Spiritist groups or Spiritist centers. Not that we follow the same religious structure as a church or a synagogue does, but we do need to have order implemented and discipline implemented. People often forget that the Spiritist center needs order because the Spiritist centers are composed by volunteers. All of us, workers, coordinators, directors, and so on, all of us are volunteers. We're not getting paid to do this. And because we're all volunteers, people think they, a lot of times, can just come into a Spiritist center, and because there's no professionals there's no pastors and so on, they can just try to change things and do whatever they want. The other side of the coin is also related to the material aspect of discipline and order in the Spiritist center, where people walk in as far as the way they dress, and as far as the way they talk, and as far as the way they behave in Spiritist meetings. So many times they forget that they are in a house of prayer. A house of prayer which sometimes is much smaller than any church you can see, less luxurious than any church or synagogue you see, but it still is a house of prayer. And people sometimes come to the Spiritist center as if they were going to the beach or to the park. It's just the way they dress, and people come in and have their cell phones on, and sometimes even talk on their cell phones during the meetings, and surf on their cell phones during the meetings, and so on, forgetting that the spiritual guides spend so much time preparing this location, this house of prayer, for us to come in and receive their beneficial energies and fluids. But once we walk in thinking about the world outside and not treating this house of prayer as a sacred place, we just don't absorb everything that is prepared to be donated to us and given to us.
So, Marisa, when you're saying this, and Kardec mentions in the item 341 of the Medium's book about the conditions through which any meeting should be under in order to assure that good spirits are there. And then they talk about the perfect synchronicity of feelings and thoughts amongst participants, the feeling of fraternity, no feeling of rivalry, of competition, etc. So when you're saying about the rules of awareness in regard to the Spiritist Center, we then conclude when people are not in that way, we're going to open the doors for obsession in the Spiritist Center. Can you tell us more? Because we know you've told us that there is this phenomenal book that is still in Portuguese, but from Dr. Lírio Cerqueira Filho, he compiles the teachings from one of the spirits through Divaldo Franco, Manuel Filomeno de Miranda, and talks about obsession in the Spiritist Center, in the Spiritist movement. Can you tell us more about this type of obsession, what the spirits can do in that regard, and how they actually play a role, especially, is it because people are not following the rules, they're not respecting each other, they are probably not respecting the center, the order? What is this obsession onto a Spiritist Center?
Yes, in this book, one of the most interesting things that we can find in the book is when Manuel Filomeno de Miranda, who is the author of the texts that are compiled in the book, tells us about a meeting that took place in the inferior spheres of spirituality, where many inferior spirits were putting a plan together on how to dominate Earth and make Earth a much worse place than it has ever been and than it is. In this plan, they included 4 major points of action. One of them would be to attack humanity by inciting humanity to utilize sex in a very wrong way or in a excessive way. The other points are for them to use narcissism and money. Now, what you're talking about is the 4th action item they had in their agenda. They have in their agenda, which is to attack humanity, and Spiritists in the Spiritist Center included, by inciting them to wanting to be more powerful. So we see a lot of people who come to Spiritist Center with so many ideas for new projects, for changes, and so on, not because they really want to help, but because they want to be powerful. And at the end of the day, we see that these individuals really don't contribute too much to our cause and to the Spiritist Center or the Spiritist group. They are usually the ones that have a lot of ideas in their pockets, but when it comes to bring them to fruition and to make them materialize, they're really not much help to the Spiritist group. And the people who are already there, the coordinators and the founders of the group, who embrace these ideas from those kind of people who are looking nothing more than to have power, than to have their ideas accomplished, these coordinators and founders are the one who are going to end up having to bring all these ideas to fruition, they're the ones who are going to have to work really hard, and sometimes even giving up the work they had already started in the Spiritist Center, so they can have time and resources to take care of the work that is being asked for or presented by these individuals.
Yeah, Mauricio, you're right. We are feeling very inspired by these insights on troubleshooting our centers. And, Kardec Radio is here for you to nourish your soul. We are already in 46 countries, and there are many people who have been emailing us. They have been emailing us to ask about, for example, questions such as obsession in the Spiritist movement, obsession in the Spiritist Center, and rules and regulations. We will reply to your questions, but now we're going to a break, and we'll be right back with you.
We will return to our program after these messages.
Spiritist Network, your gateway to on-demand Spiritist videos. www.spiritistnetwork.com.
Spread the word. Kardec Radio, to learn more about Spiritism.
Kardec Radio, live every Saturday at 11 a.m.
Nourish your soul with Kardec Radio.
Now in English, the book And Life Goes On by the Spirit André Luiz, psychographed by Chico Xavier. Buy your copy online or via your ebook reader. Go to www.ediceiofamerica.com today.
Spread the word. Kardec Radio, to learn more about Spiritism.
The Spiritist magazine is a trimestral digital periodical that publishes the latest news on the Spiritist thought and the movement in the USA and worldwide. Subscribe now at www.spiritistmagazine.com.
Nourish your soul with Kardec Radio.
Join the Third British Congress on Medicine and Spirituality. The British Union of Spiritist Societies and the International Medical Spiritist Association organize a 2-day Medical Spiritist Conference to happen on November 5th and 6th at the Rich Miggs Cultural Foundation in London, UK. Several doctors, Spiritist physicians will speak at the conference. For more information, please go to www.medspiritcongress.org.
And now we return to our program.
Dear listener, Kardec Radio is here to talk about troubleshooting the Spiritist Center. It's a resource for all of us to create a safe environment. Allan Kardec stated in the Spirit's book that pride and selfishness are the reasons why progress is impeded, is blocked. And the same happens in the Spiritist Center. We need to work on our ego. We need to exercise less of egocentric motive. It's about the general good. It's about an exercise of altruistic movement inside of us. And did you know, neuroscience already tells us that we have a special structure in the cortex that is activated when we're feeling altruistic. So our physiology is wired to process altruism, which is when we feel reaching out to people and less about our own needs. It is possible. It's the Jesus concept of life. It's the way of living. It's the concept of without charity, there is no salvation. And talking about it, now we'll go back to our guest, Mauricio Cisneros Filho, who is here to help us. Mauricio, when you talk about the obsession in the Spiritist movement or the Spiritist Center, because it begins in the center, one of the things that people, when they feel they don't approve of something, they nowadays are very good at using internet, sending emails, talking bad about things and disseminating bad ideas about this and that, and those people who are not, or even we've seen members of Spiritist Center, people who told us about it, they don't agree with the directors and they start sending, it's like a bombardment of emails to the directors of the center, the coordinators, saying, we don't agree with this, don't agree with that. It's like they become the obsessors. And now they are using internet through Facebook or through emails to start bombarding the ones they don't agree with the ideas and sharing these emails, forwarding to others. What would you say in that regard? What would be the recommendations in regard to the use of internet as well when troubleshooting the Spiritist Center?
The internet is really a wonderful channel to divulge everything that is great for everyone, and at the same time, everything that is not so good for anybody. And the problem is that it's so easy for us to type an email, either complaining about something or by talking about somebody or something. It's so easy. You just type that email and you press send, and you just went to whoever, to the whole world, who knows. But you really don't feel like you're doing anything that's very serious or that is major, because it is so quick and so sudden. It just doesn't feel like much. But internet or not, by utilizing any channels that we have to divulge and to disseminate our vision of Spiritism, or our vision of what Spiritism should be, we have always to remember and to think about, would our spiritual guides approve of what I'm doing? Is this email I'm sending, will this help our cause at all? And these are the things we should always think about when doing anything related to Spiritism, to our Spiritist Center, and to our Spiritist movement, is to ask if our spiritual guides would actually approve of that. When we think of personalities such as Chico Xavier, as Jesus, and so many others that we know, usually one thing that I do is, whenever I want to take a big step in my life, especially steps related to Spiritism, I usually try to think that they are right there next to me, especially Chico, because we had a lot of Chico was a person that was incarnated for such a long time throughout my life, and I heard a lot about him, and I saw him on TV all the time, and I read his psychographed books. So Chico was presence in my life, and still is, even though he is discarnated. So usually when I want to take a big step or in my life, I usually try to think that Chico is right there next to me, and he's either reading those emails or talking to me about the things that I want to say. In that sense, if I want to do something that is really not good, or something that is going to bring harm to myself or to others or to our center, Spiritist Center, and so on, I have Chico right there next to me, thinking and talking to me, and I just won't do it. And that usually works. A lot of times it doesn't, but that usually works.
So Mauricio, now bringing to the reality we're living here in North America, the challenges of bringing Spiritism to the context of a new culture. As we were talking of, in the behind the scenes of the show, we're mentioning that at Kardec's time, he was so culturally competent that he knew how to bring about these teachings to the people of the time in such a successful way that we see 154 years later, the spreading of Spiritism is exponential day in, day out. And for example, in Brazil, the format of presenting Spiritism, or making the front door mostly the talks instead of mediumistic meetings, or the spiritual treatments as obsessions, in America, when we talk about troubleshooting our centers, the ones that are already existent, what do we need to do in regard to how to be more culturally sensitive in the North American culture to, not to promote, I would say, because we're not here to proselytize, but mostly to make it available in a better and more culturally sensitive way? What would you say we could do in that regard?
Yeah, culture is a very important thing to talk about, because back in France, when Kardec was holding Spiritist meetings, usually what they used to do is to have study meetings and mediumistic meetings. When Spiritism was kind of like transferred to Brazil over the years, we see a Spiritism happen in a more, we can even say, church-like way, where now you have presentations and talks and so on a weekly basis, and of course also the passes and the mediumistic meetings and the study group meetings. When it's disseminated in other countries, this structure may change a little bit. When it comes here to the U.S., right now, most of the Spiritist movement in the U.S. is still done by Brazilians, as we know, is around 90% Brazilians. As this movement gets more into the hands of Americans, and more Americans become involved in coordinating and directing this movement, which has been happening gradually, maybe because of this different culture that exists in America, maybe these things may change a little bit. Who knows? Maybe they'll pay more attention or dedicate their energies more into one way of disseminating Spiritism than another. So those are things we have to take into consideration, and not really think it's anything bad, but it's just an adaptation of how people think and feel that Spiritism may be practiced or divulged.
Yeah, Mauricio, you're right. We are feeling very inspired by these insights on troubleshooting our centers. But now we're going to a break, and we'll be right back with you.
We will return to our program after these messages.
Participate on the first Spiritist Seminar of Chicago. On November 19th and 20th, the Spiritist Society of Chicago will be organizing and hosting the first Spiritist Seminar of Chicago. The theme is Spiritual Awareness for a Better Life, with speakers from Brazil, Raul Teixeira and Alírio Cerqueira.
Nourish Your Soul with Kardec Radio.
Now in English, the book Action and Reaction by the Spirit Andrea Luiz, psychographed by Chico Xavier. Buy your copy online or via your ebook reader. Go to www.ediceiofamerica.com today.
And now we return to our program.
Marisa, would you say there is like a magical recipe to every time we have problems in the center?
Well, the recipe would always be to think that the spiritual guides are present, and what would they do if they were in our shoes? But as we can't always find these solutions, even thinking of spiritual guides, we are constantly progressing in finding out new ways of resolving issues that come before us. Sometimes we go about it the right way, sometimes we don't, but we learn from our mistakes. And that's the important thing, is that we're learning and we're wanting to make our Spiritist centers a better experience for us and for others who come to the Spiritist Center. One important thing, and the most important thing for us to pay attention in a Spiritist Center, is that the Spiritist Center is put together so you will allow us to work on our inner transformation. It will help us to work in our inner transformation, because sometimes we direct our work in the Spiritist Center in so many different directions. Sometimes we dedicate our Spiritist centers too much into having an art group or a musical group or a charitable group who goes out and cooks food and visits penitentiaries and places like that and so on. And we forget to study Spiritism. We forget to pray. We forget to meditate on this wonderful project that it is the Spiritist thoughts, which really makes us progress, really makes us inner transform.
Mauricio, we have so much to learn. What would you say your final comments for us just for the show today on Troubleshooting the Spiritist Center?
As workers and as directors and as participants of the Spiritist movement, we should never do these things. We should never try to contribute to the Spiritist cause because we feel like we're being forced to do so, or because we feel that we're going to be punished by God or anybody else if we don't do so. These things are to be done out of our complete love for spiritual thoughts, for the spiritual reality that we all are, and it should really be done with love, and it shouldn't be done because we are forced to, or because we think somebody else will like us because we're doing it, because we're a Spiritist speaker or a past giver or a children and youth educator. It should be done because we feel good about it and it makes us grow.
Mauricio, we're so thankful for your time, for you sharing these experiences, and we thank you for being here. We would say that if you are in North America and you're thinking seriously about opening a new nucleus of Spiritist Center, either it's just a meeting or full force Spiritist Center, talk to Mauricio and the other officers of the United States Spiritist Council at www.spiritist.us. And if you're in Canada, you can also contact the Canadian Spiritist Council.com to share about your thoughts. And remember, Spiritist Center is all about teamwork. Without teamwork, we don't have a center. So let's count on one another and enjoy it. Mauricio, thank you so much for being at Kardec Radio and spending your time sharing insights with us.
Thank you, Vanessa. It's wonderful to be here.
We're going to a break, and we'll be right back with you.
We will return to our program after these messages.
Welcome to the third Toronto Spiritist Weekend on October 29 and 30 of 2011. The tribute event is to the 150 years of the Medium's Book, and the theme of the event is mediumship, a discussion on the concept and its practice. The main topic is going to be the lecture by Dr. Vanessa Anzalone entitled Strengthen Your Emotional Intelligence and Have a Balanced Sixth Sense. The program opens at 5 p.m. Toronto time, and the first lecture is going to be from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. The following day, on Sunday, the opening session is at 9:30 for registration, and then at 10 a.m. it starts two sessions, one demystifying mediumship with Jose Musi from Toronto, and on another room, mechanisms of mediumship. And then from 1 to 3 p.m., there is a session on mediumship or not by Paul Murphy, and on another room simultaneously, there is another session entitled Mediums and Mediumship. This is going to be held at 248 Ossington Avenue, Toronto, Canada. For more information, please contact the Toronto Spiritist Weekend at gmail.com. The event is sponsored by the Christian Spiritist Center, the Joana de Angelis Spiritist Study Group, and the Rest on the Way Spiritist Center.
Nourish your soul with Kardec Radio.
Now in English, the book Action and Reaction by the Spirit Andrea Luiz, psychographed by Chico Xavier. Buy your copy online or via your ebook reader. Go to www.ediceiofamerica.com today.
And now we return to our program.
In this inspiration of the show, we are going to answer also a question from a participant in the email who asked us if Kardec pinpointed specific rules and regulations that serve the purpose of our meetings today. For example, why can't we turn our cell phones during a session? Why can't we keep it on and even leave the room and talk to somebody whom we need outside? Well, Kardec in chapter 30 addresses it, though at that time there was no cell phone, but he addresses it in Article 18 of the Rules and Regulations, that he says silence and concentration are strictly required during sessions, and especially during study time. Can you believe it? I can't believe it. Everything is there. Some people think that when Kardec published this chapter about the rules and regulations of the Parisian Spiritist Society, he was just giving an example. No, Kardec was a visionary. He was outlining to us the rule for success in a Spiritist center, troubleshooting it from A to Z. Not only that, but he was also giving us instructions in item 19 about the fact that we can also address people who are creating problems. And he says in Article 19, 3 warnings within a year shall warrant dismissal of a member who is creating problems during discussion and disturbing the sessions. Period. Kardec is clear-cut. He is even talking in item 27 what to do when people creating so many problems that they should be invited out of the society. And he says, Article 27, since the society desires to maintain within itself the unity of the principles and spirit of mutual benevolence, it may expel any member who becomes a source of trouble or who expresses open hostility against it through writings that compromise the doctrine, who holds subversive opinions, or through any procedure of which the society cannot approve. So, when Mauricio was talking about people using internet and misusing it, that's what Kardec is talking about. The spirits are so wise. They know what we need. What about another email that we received when people asked us about what do we do when people who used to be workers in our center wants to leave the centers? It's very common. There is a message that was written by Brother X through the hands of Chico Xavier, publishing a book named O Estante da Vida. It's not in English yet, but we translated it and published last year in one of the issues of the Spiritist magazine, published by the International Spiritist Council. It's entitled Note in Session, and it addresses this very issue, which is the issue of people who were once working in the centers and suddenly, or after a series of events, they decide to quit. They decide to mind their own business and live their lives in the luxury of their homes or go elsewhere. And the question is addressed in such a way that talks about these participants as people who are under obsession. They are people who actually are not vigilant enough. And what do we do as coordinators of a center? We should respect, and as Kardec says, even facilitate their living, because if they stay, they're going to create problems for the general good, and pray for them. Not only that, but keep working and be patient. Patient in the sense that what can we do? We need to respect people's time and pace in this life. And when we talk about patience, we need to remind ourselves that there are consequences when we quit our commitment to being altruistic, because often we have a reincarnatory plan with a group of people to work in a Spiritist center. And Divaldo Franco brought to us a book, Tormentos da Obsessão, which probably will one day be translated as disturbances of obsession or torments of obsession, in which the spirit Manuel Filomeno de Miranda gives on chapter 21 a case of a spirit named Evaldo that had a commitment in Spiritism, and he decided not to follow through. Listen to the case and judge for yourself what happens to us when we don't accomplish the things we have programmed for ourselves.
At Hospital Esperanza, founded by the devoted Eurípides Bassanufo in the spiritual plane during the 1930s, a group of dedicated doctors and therapists were about to rescue Evaldo, who spent more than 10 years in extreme subjugation in lower zones. Dr. Manuel Filomeno de Miranda describes Evaldo's status as unconscious and under a deep hypnotic trance. But most surprising of his condition is that he is encapsulated in a dark cocoon.
What is this cocoon?
Asked Dr. Miranda to Dr. Messer, the coordinating surgeon. Well, Evaldo's mind has created this cocoon due to his guilty conscience and self-punishing vibrations.
Why did that happen?
He created this cocoon to escape and hide from his own misery built especially in his last reincarnation. Before his last reincarnation, he spent 10 years being prepared to work both in spiritism and politics due to debts acquired in the previous lives. He reborn in a noble spiritist home. His mother was loving and devoted. He even got married to a good spiritist wife. But as soon as he became an influential politician, he claimed no time for spiritist commitments. He then quickly attuned to corrupted individuals and engaged in extramarital affairs. And the unexpected happened. His wife was taken by a fatal cancer. He got into deep depression once he realized the great damage he did to many lives. In 3 years, he marched quickly to death. After 10 years under spiritual obsession, he was rescued by our team of workers due to his mother's intercession. And here we are preparing for a very delicate surgery in which he will need a team of surgeons to free him from his cocoon and clog his own production of self-punishing guilt.
As Jesus said, from everyone who has been given much, much will be demanded.
Let us all be careful and preserve ourselves from doing evil and not fulfilling our spiritual commitment. So we supplicate for divine help, asking for protection and inspiration to walk into the difficult journey of our spiritual ascension. This case was extracted from Chapter 21, Experiência em Comum, in the book Tormentos da Obsessão, by Manuel Filomeno de Miranda through the mediumship of Divaldo Franco.
So, as you have just listened in this case, unique experience, Evaldo is just like many of us. We need to be very vigilant because we're susceptible to spirit influence, and mostly because we have these inner plugs, our pride and selfishness. We need to be very diligent because the center does not need us, but we need the center. We need this work and the patience and the tolerance and the solidarity, as stated Kardec, in every spiritist center to proceed in repairing the wrongs of the past and fulfilling God's will. We have a unique role in the universe, and when we team work, we are much better. Together, we're better. It even rhymes. So when we talk about obsession in spiritist centers and in spiritist movement, we need to meditate, then we need to be charitable. I've seen many people who see people in the spiritist center who are undergoing obsession, and they point fingers, they reprimand, they put people aside as if they had leper, and they don't even talk to them. They are not charitable. They do not approach. They don't give each other a chance. But we here at Kardec Radio are reminding all of us that if we follow through the teachings, we are compassionate. And Jesus had taught us this, because he said, I have not come for those who are healthy, I have come for those who are ill. So if we find a practitioner, a worker in a spiritist center who has fallen in the traps of obsession, let us pray for them. Let us reach out to them and say, hey, do you need help? Come on, we always counted on you. Don't give up. Please come. Of course, if they decide to leave, they know that if they want to come back, we'll be there. Of course, we all have to follow through the orders, the rules and regulations of the center. But we cannot shut the doors of our relationships just because we have fallen, because who hasn't fallen? And as Joana de Angelis says, if you haven't fallen, it's because you're stagnated, because naturally we will make choices that sometimes are not healthy. What is important is to recover ourselves. And did you know that there is a prayer for people who are obsessed in the book, The Gospel According to Spiritism? Allan Kardec put together chapter 28, a collection of Spiritist prayers that addresses different issues in life, and a specific one, which is almost at the end of this chapter, several items on prayers for people who are obsessed, even for the spirit who is obsessing. So how about if now we wrap up this show in this high note of altruism, of charity? Let us pray for all those whom we feel, including ourselves sometimes, that are obsessed. Let us pray together, led by the very words of Allan Kardec. This is item 83 in chapter 28 of the Gospel according to Spiritism. Prayer for the obsessed person. Almighty God, deign to give us the ability to set these people whom now we think of free from the spirit or the spirits who is or are obsessing them. If it is in your designs to put an end to this trial, grant us the grace to speak to the spirits with the necessary authority. Good spirits, may you assist us, and you, guardian angels of ours, may you lend us your help. Help us unburden them from the impure fluid enveloping them by the obsessors. In the name of the Almighty God, we entreat these evil spirits tormenting them to withdraw. And there is also a prayer for the obsessing spirits, and we pray for them, wishing that the all-powerful God and the high-order spirits, who are more powerful than all of us, shall put an end to this obsession, and especially the obsessors of Spiritism. And talking about obsession, the next show is about obsession and disobsession. It's one of the main disturbances in humanity. We really need to address this issue, and we are going to bring the authority of the Spiritist teachings in combination with psychiatry. So we are going to have the honor to have here in the show Dr. Alan Sanderson, a British doctor who opened a foundation named Spirit Release Foundation. Beautiful work. He was invited by the Medical Spiritist Association to speak there years ago, and he has been collaborating with Spiritism for the last years, and we want to talk to him to understand more about the ins and outs of obsession, how to treat, in combination, the Spiritist approach with the medical traditional approach. Dear listener, Kardec Radio here wishes you many blessings during this week, and may we feel the presence of God and be inspired.
Thank you for listening to Kardec Radio, broadcasting live every Saturday morning at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Email us and share your comments at www.kardecradio.com. Until next time, we wish you many blessings.